Sales don't feel bad because you're bad at it. They feel bad because you've been trying to sell in a way that doesn't actually fit how you want to run your business. And the moment you stop trying to force conversations the way people teach online, everything starts changing. A lot of online sales advice still feels like jump into the DMs, pressure people to death, overcome objections, and convince harder. And honestly, it always felt wrong to me. I started working around radio sales teams and traditional brick and mortar businesses. I noticed something completely different. The best salespeople weren't forcing conversations. They listened first and diagnosed second. And if there was a fit, then they explained how they could help. That felt completely different from what I kept seeing and continue to see online today. Because the harder I tried to sell during conversations, the heavier everything felt. I was over explaining, over teaching, and trying to solve everything in one conversation because I thought that's what made me valuable. The problem wasn't sales, it was the process. What finally changed things for me was realizing the problem wasn't sales itself. It was trying to force myself into a sales process that didn't fit the way I actually wanted to run my business. And once I saw that, I also started noticing something else. The harder I tried to sell during conversations, the heavier everything felt because I was over explaining and over teaching and over coaching. I was trying to solve everything in one conversation because I thought that's what made me more valuable. But most people don't need somebody talking at them for an hour. What they really need is someone willing to actually listen. So I stopped treating sales conversations like presentations and started treating them like diagnosis. I started asking better questions, listening carefully, and paying attention to the patterns, and suddenly the conversations got easier. People opened up. They told me what was really going on in their business, what they had already tried, what they were frustrated by, what they actually wanted. And once I stopped trying to prove myself, the right people started showing up differently. Content started doing the selling before the call, and then something else started happening. The people who were the best fit were often already warmed up before they even talked to me. Sometimes they'd come into my DMs already explaining their situation. Sometimes they'd say, "Here's what I'm struggling with. What do you think?" And I remember having this moment where I realized my content is already doing part of the sales process for me. Because by the time they reached out, they already understood my philosophy, my approach, and the way I think about business. So I stopped trying to constantly create new content and started focusing on creating clearer content. Content built around the same questions people kept asking me, the objections, the confusion, the patterns, the things they were struggling to understand. That became the videos, the workshops, the frameworks, the webinars, and I started reusing those ideas. Not because I was repeating myself, but because repetition is refinement. I had frameworks like my date system that I still use to this day, and I reused it across webinars, workshops, and trainings. I adapted it to different audiences, but the core idea stayed the same. And I booked clients off a single webinar using concepts I had already taught before, not because it went viral, but because the audience was already warm. The messaging was refined, and the content had been tested through real conversations with real people. It's the difference between attention and trust, because there's a real difference between content that just gets attention and content that builds trust. Attention gets clicks. Trust makes somebody say this person understands what I'm dealing with. And people are exhausted by generic content now. The same scripts, the same hooks, the same talking points. The content that actually builds trust is much more specific. It reflects someone's real situation. It helps them feel understood. It helps them diagnose what's actually happening. And when you do that well, the conversations get shorter, the buyers become more decisive, and people show up already understanding your philosophy and how you work. Not because they got pressured into it, but because the content already did the trust building before the conversation ever started. And that's exactly the kind of work I help people do inside my Cash and Clients Without Chaos program and services. Not just post more content, but diagnose what's actually happening in your messaging, your sales process, and your client acquisition system. So your content starts building trust and doing part of the selling before someone ever gets on a call with you. If that's what you're ready to work on, the details are linked below. And if you want to keep going, watch this next video. It connects directly to what we talked about today.